Hi there, this is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, and welcome to part 8 of my Dardennes Brothers series. Today we're going to talk about The Unknown Girl, or La Fille Inconnue, from 2016. This stars Adèle Haenel. Also, that's probably not the proper pronunciation of her name. And it obviously has the Dardennes regulars. There's a lot of actors from 2 Days, One Night, the previous film, and obviously Olivier Gourmet, Jeremy Renier, and other actors, Fabrizio Rongione, who you'll be familiar with if you've watched the Dardennes films in order. This is another phenomenal film. We talk about shared cinematic universes, and people talk about the Marvel cinematic universe and the Star Wars shared cinematic universe. But for me, the Dardennes Brothers cinematic universe is the greatest. And it's not even close. All their films, certainly in this series, again, I can't really speak on the first two, which aren't very readily available. But obviously their films from 1996 to 2019 pretty much all happen in the same town. So you get this feeling of a shared universe where all these characters are living. Now obviously it has the same actors playing different characters, so they maybe couldn't all meet each other. Unless there's like 3 or 4 Jeremy Reniers walking about the same town and about half a dozen Olivier Gourmets. I like to think that anyway. So their whole cinematic universe is just absolutely marvellous, and you get really, a sense of time and place. I can't really think of filmmakers that have pretty much made all their films in the one location, in the one place. This again is another pretty simple setup. It's almost a conventional setup. Adèle Haenel, probably not her proper pronunciation of her name, like I said. She plays a doctor who runs this small clinic. She's replaced the previous doctor who's in ill health. And she has an intern, Julian, who is obviously learning to be a doctor. But she is also has the chance of a promotion, or is getting, not a promotion, but is getting a chance to work in a swanky clinic run by Fabrizio Rongione, the Dardennes Brothers regular. So we just follow her in this clinic and her interactions with Julienne, and they have a kid who's having a fit, and Julienne kind of freezes, and then she's a little bit on his case afterwards, saying, doctors can't afford to be emotional, and you have to snap out of it, you have to keep a distance from patients. She then gets a phone call from Rongione's character, the doctor who runs this fancy clinic, and tonight is her kind of coming out party essentially, and saying she's going to take the job and she's going to start the new clinic. But there's a ring at the door. The assistant Julian gets up to answer it, and she says, no, just leave it, we're already running an hour late. And obviously she's got to get to this shindig. So she goes to the shindig, she's introduced, and the champagne, blah blah blah. And then it cuts to the following morning, and she's going into the clinic, and a policeman stops her asking if they can see CCTV footage of the night before, because a woman has been found dead across the road near the canal, And it turns out that this woman was the woman that rang the doorbell to ask for help, and she was turned away. And then, obviously, feeling guilty, the doctor then goes round the town trying to find out the woman's name. She's got no ID, nobody knows who she is. And it becomes like an amateur sleuth film, which, let's be honest, we all enjoy. But of course, this is the Dardennes, so there's lots of levels to it. I'm not going to go into spoilers or plot moments. You're going to have to watch it for yourself, but it's another sensational Dardennes film. I know I'm sounding like a fanboy, but I am, because they are amazing. I mean, obviously, I've made it known that I'm a huge Yorgos Lanthimos fan. I think, in the last 20 years, he might be the best director that's come out. Obviously, the Korean directors are marvellous, and the Japanese directors. And Denis Villeneuve is wonderful at what he does, working within essentially the mainstream, but still making really intelligent films. But I tell you, the Dardennes are a different level, I think, for me anyway. I mean, every time I watch a Dardenne, it's almost like a palate cleanser when you watch other kind of more conventional films. Again, this one has no music. It's such a simple thing that they do. Because I've read in interviews where people, ask actors that have worked with them or whatever, what's the magic, why are their films so good? And it's such a simple thing. It's because they don't tell you anything. They let the audience figure things out for themselves. It's such a simple technique, and I don't understand why more filmmakers don't do it. I mean, I understand why Hollywood doesn't do it, because they don't actually respect their audience. So they have to explain everything within the first 5 minutes about what's going on and what the characters' backstories are, instead of just dropping the audience in. Because if you're dropped into a story with characters that you've no idea what's going on, strangely enough, that has your interest and you're hooked immediately. I'm sure I'm repeating myself every time I do a Dardennes film video, but it's such a simple thing. Just don't tell the audience everything, and strangely enough, they'll be interested. You're hooked immediately. I mean, Julian has a fantastic backstory. He clams down and then he quits. Then again, we find out as she kind of doggedly wants to find out why he's quit as well. So that's a whole story in itself. Again, her regular patients, and as her investigation continues, her relationship changes with her regular patients. Spoiler alert, this is the only spoiler alert I'll do. She decides to stay at the clinic and take over the poor clinic, essentially, rather than taking the fancy swanky clinic job. But again, because it's out of her guilty conscience, and it's about trying to help the people. Now, obviously, if the woman hadn't died, she would have just went on and taken the fancy job. But throughout the film, regardless of who the character is, they all kind of make actions that have consequences. We all make decisions. That's why the Dardennes films are so good as well, because we can put ourselves in those situations. Who do you defend? Who do you fight for? They're all decisions. Who do you back? Who do you kind of abandon? This is something that we all do and people do all over the world. Again, because it's set in their favourite town, they have built up this post-industrial world. And again, in this one, we see the underbelly of um, illegal immigrants. We see the exploitation of those illegal immigrants. Um, we see graffiti and unemployment. And so, even though this is essentially an amateur sleuth film, because the Dardennes are just such wonderful writers and creators of this world that they've made, everything has offshoots, every little detail. Um, Again, I'm not going to go into plot things because they're just so wonderful when they actually are revealed. Everybody has a little story that you can relate to, or would I do that? And again, films that are set in worlds and universes that we can't relate to, we can just enjoy, they're fine. But the Dardennes films you can really sink your teeth into. And again, they cut scenes short, they cut conversations short, that lesser directors would continue scenes, they would continue conversations. But the Dardennes just have an amazing ability just to be economical and go, you know what, that's the second half of that conversation doesn't matter. What happens in the second half of that scene doesn't matter. I would say at 107 minutes, this is one of their longer films. And about 3/4 of the way through, you do feel it could have been a little bit tighter. But then the end is just. The doctor asks a character a question at the end of the film, and the result of that question just absolutely destroyed me. But again, with the Dardennes, because they get emotion out of the viewer without using the emotional language of cinema, without using cheap musical scores that swoon and soar when you're supposed to be emotional, they don't do any of that. And that's why Dardennes films, if you're not used to them, you can feel, oh, they're distancing, and even though the way they shoot, they're not distancing. But it might take a little bit if you're just used to films going, you are to be emotional now, because here's all the music, and here's all the camera moves, and here's all the close-ups to make you emotional. The Dardennes films, the emotion is earned. It's not cheap emotion, it's not manipulated emotion. I mean, obviously they are manipulating you because they're making a film, and it's performance and all of that, but it's not cheap emotion. So when I feel emotion watching a Dardennes film, it's genuine and it is fairly substantial because they haven't told you, oh, there's an emotional bit coming up now, prepare yourself. The way lots of not very good filmmakers do, because it's an easy way out. The performances are wonderful. Adele Hanel is terrific because again she starts off being confident, again using her power over the intern, but then she realizes that her actions have consequences too. The way she kind of, like I said, becomes an amateur sleuth essentially, and prods and pulls people to try and get information out of them. Also, at one point, the police do tell her, stop doing that, like the police always do in amateur sleuth films. Again, there's no big dramatic face-off at the end of the film. There's no, I suppose that's a spoiler alert. There's no shootout, there's no car chase, there's no master criminal, there's no worldwide conspiracy going on. It's just people making choices that sometimes have bad consequences, and that is the breadth of the Dardennes films so far. We've got one left to do, from 2019. Yeah, I know I'm sounding rather biased, but it's. I mean, a big spoiler alert is the Dardennes won't be featuring in the director battles because, again, with the exception of two films which I have seen before, I'm pretty new to these films, so they're not in the director battle. But I think they would do a bit of damage if they were, depending who they were up against, obviously. Because personally, they're right up my street. They're so, like I said, they're a palate cleanser. They're so refreshing. And I do think, Bresson is a different thing. But I do think if you're trying to get into Bresson or struggling with Bresson, the Dardennes would actually be a pretty good gateway into Bresson, I think. You could watch Dardennes films, then go watch Bresson, because sometimes Bresson can be a little bit jarring, just the way he shot his films. And I do think the Dardennes would actually be a kind of gateway into Bresson. Because I plan to rewatch all the Bresson again. And I don't know, I think the Dardennes might actually help me to kind of get back into Bresson again. So that's my review of The Unknown Girl for 2016, which you can pick up. This is a Region B Artificial Eye. You can pick this up for like under a £5, because it's hardly like a bestseller. You can pick it up, used for a couple of quid pretty much, which is fairly astonishing because it is an absolutely wonderful film. Again, it's difficult for me to rank Dardennes films because they're all so wonderful. I mean, I would say maybe Kid with a Bike might be amongst my least favourite. I think I still gave that 4 stars out of 5. But again, just the subject matter, it's difficult for me to get my head around, giving up your life and sacrificing to foster a kid, or, but that's just me. But all their films so far have been at least 4 out of 5 for me, and a lot of them have been 5-star films. This one again, it's perhaps a little too long, but it just makes up for it with so many wow moments and so many beautiful little character things, and things under the surface that they're kind of talking about. Again, it's just another Dardennes film that I would highly recommend, and again, you can pick up pretty cheaply, I think. So thanks very much for watching episode 8 of the Dardennes series, and hopefully you'll join me for the last episode and a kind of brief summation of this Dardennes journey. I'll actually be sad when I've finished it, to be honest. I kind of wish they'd made 20 films, because they're all, I mean, you could argue, they're all set in this one place. They all have obviously a certain look and a certain style. People would say a lack of style. But they're just so good at what they do. And like I say, it is the greatest shared cinematic universe ever, I think. So thanks very much for watching. This is Solitary Ronin from Solitary Ronin Films, saying farewell.